everyone, welcome to today's episode of Sean's Movie Crusades. My name is Sean Wassacrew, and I'm here to review all the latest films in theaters and streaming, as well as anything that you guys recommend, whether it be recent films or old school movies. Before we get to today's episode, don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel, so that way you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos that pop up, and also don't forget to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Now today we're going to be reviewing one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and if you guys want to know more of those movies, go ahead and go back to the videos list and you can find my most anticipated movies of 2019. But this one is the final one, well, presumably the final one, of the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy, How to Train Your Dragon 3, The Hidden World. Now for me, How to Train Your Dragon ranks right up there with, I mean, it's no longer going to be a trilogy, obviously, after the summer, but with Toy Story as probably one of the best animated trilogies out there. The first two films are fantastic. They well thought out stories for Hiccup, who was basically a Viking who's not really a Viking, and who was brought up to hate dragons, and in turn finds a dragon, befriends it, and then basically turns his entire Viking community, especially his father, who's the chief, into loving dragons. And then the sequel, basically continuing to create a community of Vikings and dragons. And now we go into the third film of Hidden World. And both the first two films, easily highlights of the year each time they came out. I personally loved the second one a little bit more than the first one because I felt the second one had a lot more emotional beats, especially the big emotional gut punch for anyone who has seen the movies, and for anyone who hasn't, I won't say what it is. But yeah, I really love these movies, so I was really excited for this one because, I mean, anyone who's watched these movies, I mean, they all love Toothless. I mean, everyone says, no, Toothless is like my cat, or Toothless is like my dog. And the character relationship between Hiccup and Toothless is one of the favorites of many movies nowadays, or animated in general. And it doesn't stop in this film. Hiccup and Toothless are fantastic in this movie together, and they're highlights of the movie whenever it's just those two on screen, and just their playful back and forth with one another. Now, the plot of Hidden World is that it takes place, and I believe they said it in the movie, it takes place 1 year after the events of the second film, and basically, it's kind of where things left off, to the point where Hiccup and his core group of sidekicks, meaning his soon-to-be wife, Astrid, played by America Ferrera, Rough Nut, played by Kristen Wiig, Fish Legs, played by Christoph Mintz-Plasse, Snotlap, played by Jonah Hill, and the twins, Tough Nuts, this time voiced by Justin Ruppel and not TJ Miller, and Rough Nut, I think I said Rough Nut last time, Tough Nut is Justin Ruppel's role. Rough Nut is played by Kirsten Wiig. They're still going about, actually with the additions of Valka, played by Cate Blanchett, who we find out is Hiccup's mother in the second film, and Eret, played by Kit Harington, or many people might know him as Jon Snow from Game of Thrones. They're still going out there and basically finding dragons and saving them from trappers, and bringing them back to their home in Berg. The problem that you're seeing in this, and that becomes a problem in the film, is one, the dragon population has become too much. Literally in the film, it looks like it's at least 10 dragons to one person, and the place is littered with dragons, almost to the point where it feels like it's a pest problem. There's maybe one line of dialogue that states the urgency and issues with this, but they quickly kind of brush it under the rug. But the other problem is because they keep saving all these dragons from trappers, that they are basically making Berg a target. And they know that eventually people are going to come and attack their area. Even though it's defended and there's tons of dragons around, they are quickly becoming a target. And that's what eventually actually does happen, is that there is a infamous dragon hunter who specializes in killing Night Furies, which most people know is what Toothless is, and he's the last of his kind. And this hunter's name is Grimmel, and he's voiced by F. Murray Abraham. And he has made it a focal point to team up with a core group of trappers to basically infiltrate Berg and capture all the dragons, as well as let Grimmel kill Toothless. And that becomes basically the big focal point of the story. And on the Hiccup side of things is realizing that the world is just not prepared to coexist with dragons, such as his father said in the first film. And so he is trying to find what is dubbed the hidden world, which is something that his father told him about when he was a child, where dragons live and humans do not. And so he wants to basically uproot everyone in Berg, including the dragons, to find this hidden world and stay hidden away from all the trappers and people trying to hunt them down. And then that basically is the story of Hidden World, or the plot of Hidden World, as well as, obviously, as you see behind me, that we find out that the Night Fury, known as Toothless, is not the only one of his kind, as he does find a female counterpart in this one that they call a Light Fury. She's not really given a name. She's just known as the Light Fury in this. But yeah, that's the general plot of Hidden World. What works in this movie? It's a How to Train Your Dragon film. Let's put it this way. If you love the first two films, you're going to enjoy this one for the most part. The movie... One thing that the movies always had, or the trilogy's always had, is that the movies have always looked fantastic. And each film, going into this one, is better than the next because since 2010, when the first How to Train Your Dragon came out, the CGI effects and animation effects have gotten better and better and better. And in this film, the visual qualities of this movie is astounding. Every detail, even to the point where... For the most part, when you look at Hiccup, for an example, he's clean-shaven for at least most of this film. But when they actually do a close-up of Hiccup in the movie, you actually see that he has peach fuzz right here. You can see the individual hairs on his chin, and that's something that you never really noticed before in the first two films. So the level of quality and detail, especially in hair, has been greatly upped, and the color dynamic is basically off the charts visually. And there's one particular scene, first off, the Hidden World that this movie is dubbed after looks incredible. It looks like it's something right out of Avatar, and probably even better than Avatar. And I wish we could have spent more time there than what we actually did get in the film, but there's one particular scene that was a standout for me, and that there's this big waterfall, which is like the entrance of the Hidden World, and this is not really spoilers, stuff's like in the trailers, but the way they shot this waterfall is a phenomenal shot, to the point that it felt like a real-life camera following these characters instead of it being animation. There's this one point where Toothless, Hiccup, Astrid, and I'm blanking on her dragon, are flying around this waterfall, and the way the camera is panning around them as they're flying around it literally feels like it's a live action shot. And just the level of quality with the animation in this film is astounding. And it is definitely something that, if you have the ability to see this in IMAX, I'm not 100% sure if it's an IMAX, I'm pretty sure it is, but if it is somewhere in your area to see it, this is a must watch in IMAX and 3D, because it is built for that. If you don't have that, it does not make the viewing experience any less enjoyable. It's just that it was built for this viewing, and you really get the full power of how amazing it looks with that kind of format compared to the 2D format. All the battles in this film are shot very well as well, and they're a lot more intense this time around. The villain Grimmel has two, or it's not. He actually has like you kind of lose count of how many he has. He's like anywhere between 2 to 5 of these very special kind of dragons that are like scorpions, and they are terrifying in this movie. I mean, if there was any reason for you to be terrified of dragons in this film, which this franchise has really made you to a point to not be scared of any dragons, these dragons are terrifying. I would rather go against Drogon in Game of Thrones than to ever deal with these dragons in this film that are led by Grimmel, because these dragons are horrifying. and the level that they are able to go about things. I mean, I'm sorry, they're the most terrifying dragons I've ever seen, hands down. But the battle shots, like I said, are intense. They're shot incredibly well. They're choreographed for animation purposes very well. And while it doesn't get as big of a battle landscape as it did in the sequel, even though it kind of shows like it's going to, but it is very small in terms of the battle sequence. Like I said, it looks great. Everything about this movie looks fantastic. Another great thing about the film is the mature build-up of the Hiccup character over the over the course of the 3 films. From basically a kid in the first film who is kind of the scared little twerp who just wants to be a Viking but doesn't want to be a Viking, to kind of coming into his own ways into becoming the leader that he is being brought up to be in the sequel, to actually becoming that leader in the 3rd film and actually learning how to run the world that he is surrounded by and how to deal with the dragons and his family and friends. The growth of the Hiccup character in this movie is incredible. Jay Burchell does a fantastic job voicing Hiccup, even though he does have that nasally voice that can annoy people. He really grows into the character in the 3rd film. If you guys loved him in the first 2 movies, you're going to love him even more in the 3rd film. The Hiccup character as a whole comes full circle all the way through in this movie. From the last shot to the first shot, you're going to love the Hiccup character overall. And that also goes for Astrid. Astrid's character is fantastic, but she's fantastic in all the movies. The back and forth character dynamics between Astrid and Hiccup is an enjoyable part of the film, almost as enjoyable as Hiccup and Toothless being together. You can see the love that the 2 characters have, and that their building blocks of their relationship are growing as they go on. As they're not quite ready to hit this one tilt at the beginning of the film, you see that build and growth in both their characters go through to the end of the movie. Like I said just now, any time the characters on screen are Hiccup and Astrid, Hiccup and Toothless, Hiccup and the Light Fury, or any combination of those 4, the movie is top notch. It's the most enjoyable when it's those 4 on screen. You can't help but to laugh or just smile and be happy when it's those 4, any combination of those 4 on screen. There's also some emotional beats in the film as well. Not to the extent or as high as I felt in the sequel, but there are certain elements in this film that, especially near the end, that really puts a good endpoint on the trilogy to basically... I mean, could they make a 4th film down the road? Absolutely. But it definitely would be a lot further in the years of the characters instead of it being something that's like straight after the end of this 3rd film. But they do put an emotional beat, final like endpoint to this trilogy, so that way if they decide to finally stop with the films, which it looks like that's what they're aiming for, you get a good finale end to it that could leave some not so dry eyes in the theater as they're watching it. It doesn't hit the same emotional beats, I feel, as in the 2nd film, but it's still very good emotionally, way to end the film overall. And just kind of how the film goes about in terms of growing up and becoming a leader for the Hiccup character. What does not work in the movie. Now, in normal circumstances, like the first 2 films, there wasn't really a whole lot that I didn't like about the movies. I love those movies immensely. This one, not so much. There are some problems with this film overall. The main problem that stands out like a sore thumb is the sidekicks. In the first 2 films, Snotlout, Fishlegs, Rough Nut, Tough Nut, they're comic relief, but they're used very sparingly and not taking up too much screen time. So while they're not necessarily that funny, they're not in it long enough for it to be painful. This movie, entirely different situation. Especially, in particular, Tough Nut and Rough Nut, the twins. Snotlout, he does have kind of a character arc in this that is funny, but also kind of annoying to the point where I felt like if he had his opportunity, he would turn on Hiccup. to become the leader of the tribe, which is not something that I didn't want to think about in this movie, because there's literally one part in the film where he says something, and I'm like, wow, if he had the opportunity to actually do it, he would probably stab Hiccup in the back so he could be in charge. Which doesn't bode well for the character. It's not something that I ever saw in the character, and it was really something that I didn't like to see in the character overall. It's one line he says in the film, but it was enough to stand out for me to go, I don't like that. Fish Legs is basically wasted in the film. He's not even really a focal point. But Tough Nut and Rough Nut, oh my god, they are unbearable in this movie, especially Tough Nut. Justin Ripple, like I said, he takes over for T.J. Miller, and he's basically trying to do his best T.J. Miller impression, which at certain points sounds like T.J. Miller, and at other points sounds like he lost his T.J. Miller accent halfway through the line and just decided to rough it out. His character is completely worthless in this film. Excuse me. He's given way too much screen time. He's given way too much dialogue in the movie. And every time he's on screen, I just wanted to kind of fast forward through him or mute him until he was no longer on screen. Rough Nut doesn't have nearly as much screen time, but she has one incredibly long, annoying scene that you just want to get through. And I get it's supposed to be there for kids to be funny, but every adult in the theater is just going to go, oh my god, shut up. And then she does something in the movie that literally, and like I said, I get it's a kid's movie, and a lot of people are like, you're thinking too much, it's a kid's movie. But the way these films are shot, especially DreamWorks, they're aimed more towards kind of like teenage adults with childlike elements. Her character, at one point in this movie, does something so blatantly stupid and puts the entire camp in danger that you just kind of wish she got killed. Because it's just like, she does something so dumb, and instead of like repercussions, it's just like, oh, that's Rough Nut. No, like, she literally does not care about anyone. She doesn't care about anyone's safety or anyone's well-being. All she cares about is herself, and she does something in the movie that literally could have cost everyone their lives. And it's just, there's just no repercussions to the character. That's just how stupid her character is. And like I said, Tough Nut is just as bad, but worse, because he's given way too much screen time overall. Both those characters, incredibly annoying throughout. And the two characters that I actually wanted to see more out of were the two newbies from the sequel, which was Valka, who plays Hiccup's mother, voiced by Kate Blanchett, and Eret, who is voiced by Kit Harington. I was hoping to get more from those characters in this film that we got in the sequel, and they're like not really used at all in the movie. And Valka kind of does her badass stuff throughout, but she's just kind of scenery, and Eret's just kind of there. Gobber, played by Craig Ferguson, who's been a staple of the franchise from the first film to the end. He's wasted in this movie also. And it's just like, he's there for comedic relief and for really nothing more. Gerard Butler shows back up again as Stoic, but it's only in flashbacks, and even then, one of the flashbacks fits, and the other one was just kind of, we wanted to use Gerard Butler, so we're just going to throw in another flashback just to give him some more dialogue. So the characters that you actually wanted to see more of, you don't get, and the characters you wanted less screen time of, you get way too much of. The other problem that you get too is that the villain, Grimmel, does not reach the heights of dangerousness as Drago in the sequel. He's built up very well to start the film, to the point that this guy means business and this guy is a danger, but then halfway through the film, he just becomes a generic bad guy, and just kind of falls flat by the end of the film, and that kind of falls also into the final battle itself. It just felt very rushed and almost too easy and too quick, in my opinion, that it really, while you built the film up that this is going to be a really big battle, or this is really going to be a big problem for Hiccup and all them to deal with, it's 10 times easier than what they dealt with in the sequel. and it just was it just didn't seem like they knew quite how to build up this battle, which just kind of happens and it ends just as fast. I kind of felt like there should have been one more beat in the film to kind of build up the villains that they just didn't do. They just wanted to focus more on Toothless and the Light Fury for more cutesy stuff for cutesy factor instead of actually building up a good prominent villain for the film overall. And like I said, and that starts off great, but then falls flat compared to the Drago of the sequel. And like you said, while I liked the emotional ending, I also wasn't much of a fan of where the finality of it went. Like, I get why they did it, and I get the reasoning for why they did it, but when there is a time jump at the end of the film, and I just was kind of like, I don't buy this situation. Like I said, I can't go too much into it without spoiling the movie, so I'm not going to. It's just that we get to the finality of the film, it makes sense, I understand it, but then the time jump happens, and without going too further, I don't buy what happens during the time jump. It just seems like I don't feel like these characters would happen in the time jump between the time jump. It's just based off the characters from all three, that we've grown to love over 3 films. I don't buy what happens during the time jump, and so while the ending was emotional and happy to a point, I also didn't quite buy it. But yeah, overall, I still really, really enjoyed the movie for the most part. It's still, as of right now, the best movie of 2019 compared to what we've had so far, but it is only February. And it's definitely not going to stay in the #1 spot. While I liked the movie as a whole, I can't help to be a little disappointed in it as well, because the first 2 films were so fantastic that, yes, I had a very, very high expectations of it, and it didn't quite reach it in certain respects, mainly because of the things that I mentioned before that I felt like didn't work. But it is still an enjoyable film overall. So if you are a fan of the How to Train Your Dragon series, you will like this movie. You probably won't like it as much as the first 2 films like I did, but you're still going to enjoy it overall. You're not going to hate the movie by any means. It's just that you just are going to watch it and you'll be like, it was good, but it wasn't as good as the first 2 films. It ends fine for the trilogy, so if this is the end point, great, but it's not as good as the first 2 movies. And that's my overall thoughts of it. If you like the series, you're going to like this movie. It's just not as good as the first 2 films. If you aren't a fan of the series, then I don't know why you'd watch the third one anyway. But yeah, that's basically the review. I hope you guys enjoyed the review. If you guys did, go ahead and hit that like button. If you feel like the review is worth sharing, go ahead and hit that share button. Most importantly, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that way you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos that pop up on the channel. I will be doing one for Fighting with My Family. I'm probably going to go check that out tomorrow. And then I'll probably also get a video out for the Oscars before it shows up on Sunday. So look out for those 2 videos as they'll be popping up here in the next day or 2. Excuse me. Sorry, I am sick, so I'm trying to make it through this without dying. But yeah, if you guys have any comments, what did you guys think of the movie? Did you guys like the movie? Did you guys not like the movie? Do you agree or disagree with my review? What points did you like or not like about it? Let's discuss it. Let's talk. And if you guys have any recommendations for any movies that you guys would like to see, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And until next time, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.